When the Lord sends Nathan to David after he has committed adultery with Bathsheba and murdered Uriah, why doesn't he just say, David, you have committed adultery with Bathsheba and murdered Uriah? Why did he tell him a story about a poor man's pet lamb? Why this beating around the bush? Why not get straight to the point? For an answer, just look at what the story achieves. It does something in David that the mere statement of his crimes could never do. It makes him burn with anger at the injustice, to really feel what God feels. The story enables him to do this. It gets right under his skin. And then, of course, he finds out too late to get his defences up. He's burning with anger against himself. God has given us a book full of stories we used to sing back in the day when I was small. And yes, indeed, he has, each one of them primed and ready to go off. They engage our emotions as well as our minds. Somehow, we never have the energy, do we, or the inclination to judge ourselves with any great accuracy. You know, a few tepid platitudes, an excuse here, a blind eye there, and whatever I've done, I can more or less basically live with myself. But not with God. Not with God. For God to restore me to fellowship with himself, I need to feel what I've done, as well as just acknowledge it. We said on Sunday, when God does justice, he loves to consult. He knows how hard it is for sinful human beings to see the truth about themselves. How many techniques we have for self-deception, for the hardening of our hearts and the keeping up of a front. So, a book full of stories. And all the time, in the telling of them, we think we're being asked, what should be done with him or her, or about this or that? And we gladly answer, because it's all so simple. And then we find out that the question we just answered was really, what should I do with you? See, we are always judging in the presence and in full sight of the judge himself. The warning of Matthew 7, 1-6, do not judge or you too will be judged, is echoed in a lot of the parables of Jesus. Consider what the servant is told in the parable of the 10 minas. I will judge you by your own words, you wicked servant. Think of the unmerciful servant being let off that huge debt and then going off and throttling his fellow servant for the sake of a few quid. Sometimes, like with the parable of the tenants, Jesus straight out asks his hearers the really obvious question. Therefore, when the owner of the vineyard comes, what will he do with those tenants? And they give the obvious answer, because it's all so easy to see when you're dealing with a story. But then comes that first Good Friday, when they're standing in the early morning light on the stone pavement in front of Pilate, and they're faced with the question, Barabbas or Jesus? Simple question. I think they forget about the story of those tenants and how simple and easy it was to give Jesus that answer. That morning, I think it all got complicated again, didn't it? They probably thought a lot about personal security, about national security, about the future of their children, about their commitment to their leaders, about the relationships that they developed with important people. And so they gave the answer that they gave. Barabbas, please, Pilate. And then, on the day of Pentecost, standing in front of Peter, they realise, after all, it isn't complicated. It's simple. Therefore, let all Israel be assured of this, God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Christ. And they are cut to the heart. God has given us a book full of stories. When we read the stories, the answers seem so simple. And when we live our lives, the questions seem far more complicated. To live as God's people involves more than listening to his stories. It means we are part of his stories, an active part, which challenges me to live a simpler life. If you have been, thank you for listening.